Julie?
All right. John Roberts, thank you. Kelly.
For more on this, let's bring in Nile Gardiner, director of the Margaret Thatcher Center for Freedom at the Heritage Foundation. Now, good of you to join us today. Hope you're doing well.
My pleasure.
So let's get right to it. John Roberts just reported, could this be a thaw in relations between Russia and the United States, more specifically Vladimir Putin and President Donald Trump? What say you?
I don't think you're going to see warmer relations between Washington and Moscow. As long as Vladimir Putin is the leader of Russia, you are not going to see a constructive partnership between the United States and Russia, because the Russian regime has fundamentally different interests to those of the United States, Great Britain, and other U.S. allies. And as President Trump pointed out in his excellent speech in Warsaw on Thursday, the Russians have been hugely problematic on many fronts, including in Ukraine, in Syria, across the Middle East. And so the Russians, frankly, are an adversary of the United States. They are deeply unconstructive when it comes to international affairs. And I think that in Warsaw, President Trump sent the right message to Moscow, which is that they need to change their behavior.
Do you think he did enough in that meeting? And we weren't there. The news media wasn't privy to that meeting and the exchange these two world leaders had. Do you think the president was forceful enough in saying you meddled with our elections? Should he have gone on to say, in so many words, cut it out, knock it off, don't ever let it happen again, or this will be the consequence of that?
Well, I hope that's the message that the president conveyed to Vladimir Putin. We don't know the full extent of all the discussions. After all, it was a 2.5-hour meeting overall. Rex Tillerson gave some insights into the discussion, and Mr. Tillerson did point out that President Trump pressed Putin several times on the issue of the U.S. intervention, or the Russian intervention in the U.S. election. And the Russians really do need to be held to account. I think that the United States needs a strong, robust, overarching strategy in terms of dealing with the Russian threat on several different
Now I want you to
fronts.
hold that thought, because you're going somewhere that I want to bring in UN Ambassador Nikki Haley, who is speaking to CBS Face the Nation. Here's what she said. We've got a clip of that. Let's listen to it.
President Trump still knows that they meddled. President Putin knows that they meddled, but he is never going to admit to it, and that's all that happened.
Given that the president, as you said, knows that the Russians meddled, what consequences will they face as a result of that action?
I think you're going to have to ask the president. I think that's one of the things is first is confronting them, letting them know that we know this happened, letting them know it can't happen again.
So getting back to what she said and getting to your point about consequences and what should be done in terms of Russia, or at least making sure that Russia is not doing this in the future, what should be done, in your opinion?
Well, Ambassador Haley is absolutely right. There should be consequences for the Russians. They can stretch from further economic sanctions, also the targeting of any Russian individuals involved in intervening in the U.S. Presidential election. We could consider various measures on the economic front as well, including excluding Russia from the SWIFT banking system, which would frankly, I think, bring the Russian economy to its knees. Already the Russians have been hit hard by US and European sanctions. We should also be strengthening our support for the people of Ukraine. I was just actually in Ukraine a couple of weeks ago. The United States should be sending defensive weapons to the Ukrainians to help them defend themselves. After all, there are 10,000 Russian troops fighting in eastern Ukraine alongside separatists there. It's a brutal war. The Ukrainian people do need our help at this time.
You know, you heard me say yes there, and I did it with some spontaneity in it. I just spoke with two people from Ukraine, two young people who are here in America visiting. And the one thing that they told me now is that all they want is peace. And it's going to be hard to find peace when you have someone like Vladimir Putin at the helm of Russia, who's bent on making sure that Russia becomes what he refers to as a former Soviet empire.
Yeah, absolutely. Vladimir Putin really is a vampire feeding off Ukraine with very, very aggressive intentions towards Eastern and Central Europe. He's directly threatening the Baltic states, Poland, and many other countries in Europe. He's an extremely dangerous, unscrupulous individual, and the United States and its allies must be extremely robust and strong in the face of any kind of Russian intimidation. And the message must be sent loud and clear that any threat to NATO member states in Europe will be met with military force by the US and its allies.
Nile Gardiner, very sobering thoughts, and always appreciate your perspective, sir. Good day to you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right, Julie.
Now to the battle over health care. Senate GOP leaders planning to make a final push to pass their